This conference will now be recorded.
Perfect. My name is Paul Lambert. I'm the senior trainer here at TeslaLink. Today we are going over an introduction to tenant administrators, which is going to be usually the people that are in the office doing the setup for a lot of this. Could also be doing the inspections, but most of the documentation, most of the things that we go over today are going to be based around setting this up and the more administrative side of TeslaLink. So TeslaLink is a system that works towards certifications and asset management and tracking those assets and the work that's done to them and to produce those certifications. Um, on this left-hand side menu, actually, let me double check. I'm not sure that this is, yeah, this is not showing correctly. Give me just a second here to reshare the screen. There we go. On this left-hand side menu, you can see two different areas, asset management and forms. These are the two areas where most of the work is going to be done. The other one that we'll look at briefly is going to be settings and then a little bit of download as well. Or sorry, import, which is on a separate session. So on this left-hand side, under asset management, we have the things that go into an asset. So an asset is anything that you could put in front of you that you're working on. This could be a piece of frac iron. This could be a hose. This could be a missile truck or missile trailer. This could be the employees in front of you. Whatever you want to make an asset, you could put in here. So let's go ahead and open this up and take a quick look at what goes into an asset, and then we'll look at how to create those things and how you might structure that for your company. This is the search field that you can use to narrow down what assets you want to view, and conveniently, this is also all the things that go into an asset. So let's go ahead and search here, and I'll bring up just one of the random ones that we have, one of the tests, and let's go over what's actually in here. So the asset number is the unique identifier that's used. In other cases, this might be a serial number or something similar. The reason that we use asset number instead of serial number in here is because if you have two separate vendors and each of them has a serial number that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then that is a unique serial number for each of them, but obviously it would not be unique for you since you have two people that have that same one. So instead, we ask you to provide an asset number, which is whatever you want it to be. Some people do sequential. So the first one is just 00001, the next one 00002, and so on. Some people, especially in the frac and hose industry, take whatever number is stamped onto the material that they're working with and use that as the asset number. And then lifting and rigging often will use whatever number is next or whatever number is tagged in on there. It just depends on your company. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just whatever system you want to use to keep up with those and make sure that every asset number is unique. If you do try and put in one that's not unique, TeslaLink will stop you and say, hey, sorry, we can't make that until you make it unique. So you don't need to worry about that. It will throw up the warning to let you know. Serial number is an optional field. It's just if you want to keep track of a serial number in addition to your asset number. For instance, if your hose has a manufacturer number that you create, and then also it has a serial number for some of the parts, you might put that in there. Barcode and chip IDs are two different ways of keeping track of things outside of the asset number. A barcode is just like you would see at the store where you scan it in and it puts in a number for you, and then you can search by using that unique number. And chip ID is the RFID equivalent of that, where you can scan in one or a bunch of different assets at the same time, and it'll bring up the RFID chip for each one and bring you into the screen. The owner is going to be your customer list. So for manufacturers, your customers. So if you're a manufacturer, this would be both yourself and all the different people that you sell to. If you're a frac iron research, then it would be your shop, and it would also be all the different people that you service, the people that you go out and do tests for and certifications for. And then location is going to be the different physical locations or ways that you want to break down that customer. So for instance, you can include sublocations. So for instance, you might have Shell as one of your customers, and then you might have a location that is North America. And within the North American location, you have Canada, US, and Mexico. And then within the US, you have East Coast, West Coast, and South. Within South, you have Texas and Louisiana. Within Texas, you have Odessa and Kilgore, so on and so forth. You can break it down really well, which means it makes it a lot easier then when we're doing reports to narrow it down and get analytics and information on the different locations. So you can say, I want to know whatever this information is about the entirety of the southern region, or I want to know only about this one location, or I want to know about this yard but not this other yard, for instance. The description is in case your asset number is not useful. So, is not descriptive. So for the asset number on this one, you can see it's just a series of numbers. That doesn't tell me what it is. So I want to have the description here that explains what this actually is. And if I wanted to, I could also put in an image so that you can see what that looks like. All right. Manufacturer is exactly what it sounds like. You create a list of manufacturers and you can then assign different manufacturers to different assets on here. It gives you a good idea of being able to sort through and say, I want to look at every asset that exists from this manufacturer that I own. Or you can say, I want to check, for instance, an end of life by checking all the data and saying, well, over the past few years, it's taken 4 years for us to mark this one as inactive from this manufacturer, but for the same item from different manufacturers, taking us 6 years. And it gives you an easy way to break down that data for you. Date of manufacture, in-service date, and expiration date are all fields that you can set up if you choose so. They are exactly what they sound like and fairly self-explanatory. The parent is going to be if you want to do a parent-child asset link. So for instance, if you have a crane, the overall crane might be the parent, and then you might create a child asset that is the trolley, one for the block, one for the motor, so on and so forth. And that way you can have them all linked together. And then when you move them from one location or one owner to another, it'll ask you, do you want to move all of them? You can kind of jump back and forth. Right now, the if you fill out like a form or something like that on one asset, it will not fill it out on all the rest of them. So that functionality will be coming in the future, but is not currently available. Last couple things are going to be the attributes here, which are just extra pieces of information you want to know about a product. For instance, we have a wire rope sling, so you might want to know the capacity of that wire rope sling, which in this case is 2 tons, or the size of it, which is 10 feet. Just general information like that. You can put in as many as you want or as few as you want, and you can customize them to whatever information you want to know about it. And you can choose to fill in or not fill in whichever ones as well. So you can see this top one is empty. Schedules are the different forms or certifications that are going to be produced and how often you want to produce them. So in this case, we don't have a frequency on any of these because we don't know if this is going to happen every 6 months, a year, 10 days, whatever it may be. But if, for instance, I know that we need to do a visual inspection every 6 months for this customer, then I can just put in every 6 and change this down to months. And now it'll be on a schedule that says 6 months from now, this needs to be done. And if it's 6 months from an earlier date, I can go over and change the start date to be further in the past. So we can say, actually, this was in January 9th. And then it'll recalculate the date. Now you see the due date changed according to what the start date and the frequency is. Completed work is going to show any forms that you've started. So for instance, if I had gone into a visual inspection and started left in progress, it would show up here. Or if I completed it and either passed or failed it, it would show up in completed work as well. So anything that has been, any form that has been started or finished for an asset is going to be under this completed work section. Let's go ahead and save that. And then the status log and location history do similar things. They track what has changed. So location history, if you change the owner or the location, let's go ahead and do that real quick. It will keep track of that. Give me just a second to pull up the list here. So when I do that and save it and go back over to location history, oops. I give it just a second to reload here. Oops, no. There we go. So you can see who the previous owner was, the previous location, when it was changed, and who changed it. So it gives you visibility into what happened and accountability. Same thing for the status log. If I choose to change the status up here from active to one of the others, it will keep track of what changed, who changed it, and when they changed it. And it'll do that for all assets and all statuses. On this left-hand side is how we set up a lot of the information for here. For instance, the tags in the manufacturer. So let's look starting down with the tags here. Tags are essentially keywords that you can attach to an asset or to an asset template or to a form template. And all these are just easier ways to find things. So for instance, if I'm searching for an asset and I remember that it was a piece of 1502 swivel joint iron, but I don't remember what the asset was. I don't quite remember who the customer was, something like that. I could use several different tags to find that piece. So I might have a tag for 1502. I might have a tag for swivel joint. I might have a tag for frac iron. I might have a tag for the outside diameter, something like that. And I could use a combination of those tags that I have attached to that asset to bring up a list of things that have those tags. And so this is where I would put those in. Now, tags are global, which means that everybody who creates a tag, it gets put into a communal database. So if I click this include opt-out button, and then I press search, it's going to bring back, I have it set to load 1,000 items at a time, but it's going to bring up uh, the tags that everybody has made, not just myself. And so you can see there's a bunch of different ones right now. So we always want to use this first to see if the tag that we want is already created. So for instance, if I'm looking for length and I click this include opt-out, it's going to show me length that anybody has added anything that includes length in it. So for instance, we have adjustable length lifting beam, not really what I'm looking for. Whereas wire rope length is actually something that I want to use. So I can click this little opt-in button, and that's going to add it on to my local list. So now if I unclick this, we're going to look back at my list again instead of everybody's. And you can see wire rope parentheses length pops up. Now, if I decide I actually don't want this anymore, this wasn't something that's useful for me, I can click on opt out and it takes it off my list and I don't have to mess with it again. There you go. You see it's gone. So you can find based on that list by using this include opt out button. If it's not on that list, you can go up to this top right and click on create new and then type in the name that we want. So we could do, what was it, wire rope length. And I could add that in then. If I click save, it'll add it to my list as well as to the global list for everybody to use. I don't actually need this, so I'm gonna go ahead and delete it. Tags are a very good way of organizing and searching for things. We highly recommend putting as many tags as you think you would use on any asset. So anything that you have in the description for sure would be a tag. So for instance, going back to that one that we were looking at just a second ago, this one right here, you can see this is a 10-foot wire rope sling from P&W Ironworks. This part, the P&W Ironworks, is going to be the manufacturer, so I don't need that as a tag really because I can already search for it. But I would want one for 10-foot, I would want one for wire rope sling, probably one for sling. And this particular one is a 4-leg. So you can see I have one for sling, one for wire rope, one for 4-leg. Excuse me, the only one that I don't have right now is the 10-foot because I haven't added that as a tag itself. So you can see because I don't have 10-foot, if I go into here to select more tags, it does not appear on the list. So this list is generated from our local list. If I want to add something on here, first I need to go to tags and I need to add it into my own list and then it'll pop up on there. Manufacturers works largely the same way. So it's going to give me my list of the ones that I have right here. This is my local list. If I want to look at other ones, always click this include opt-out button first and search for them and see if it's already on the list somewhere. If it's not, then I can go up into this top right, create new, and add my manufacturer here. If it is already on that list, then exact same as before, I can just opt in like that. And it's going to add it onto my list. And now when I search, Back in my own list, you can see it added in Armco here. If I want to get rid of any of these, I can just click opt out. Even if I add new up here and create my own, I can still opt out of it. Looking at customers, this one gets slightly more confusing. The customers that you have in your list, you have the option of viewing things kind of from their point of view. So you can see up in the top right, we have this blue button that says My Tenant. This is the list of different people that you can create things for. So if I want to create a customer for myself, let's go ahead and click search. It's going to bring up my list of the customers that I've already created. So you can see them right here, and I can do whatever I need to on here. It only takes a little bit of information to create a customer. And this information is not used to actually send an email to them or call them. So this is just kind of like think of it like a digital Rolodex almost. It's just for your convenience on being able to quickly get information. This does not create a user for them. So just because I have Chevron in here with this email and with the phone number, oh, I don't have a phone number right now, that does not mean that Chevron is able to access my system right now. I do have to have a customer in order to create a user for that customer, but creating a customer does not give them access to the data on your system, their data or yours. So let's go ahead and go back to the list here and look at locations. So you can see what I'm talking about. This is My Tenant. So if I click search, you'll see these are the different locations that I have for my production account here, the Paul Prod account. If I want to create a location for somebody else though, you'll notice those are not here. So up in the top right where it says My Tenant, I can click this and I can switch down. For instance, let's go to SEPCO. And then you'll notice SEPCO has its own set of locations. These are locations that are different from the ones that I had on mine. And this will be for each customer. So you can go in and to each customer, you will add in whichever locations you need. And then you can do sub-locations. So if we click on this tree view here, it'll give you a little bit easier view than what you see here. So let's go ahead and open both these up. And you can see we have two locations here on this top level, but within URSA, we have a Prince location. And you can do this as many times as you wanted. So if there were, for instance, 3 different yards in the Prince location or something, I could click on this drop down and I would have those yards here. In order to actually create that, let's do that together. Up in the top right hand corner, I click on Create New. And then I would add in the name right here. So yard 1, for instance, and then choose the parent location of Prince and save. Let's see, Jay, if you don't have the blue option on your screen, then there's 2 different things that could be happening. The more likely one is that you don't have customers added yet. So if you don't have customers, it's going to default to the one called My Tenant, which is your own account. If it is not showing that and you're positive you have other customers, it might be a permissions issue. So under settings, you can choose who has visibility of what. And if you do not have permission to view customers, then that would also prevent you from being able to see that blue box up in the top right. Additionally, it's not on every screen, but obviously the ones that I've shown so far, it is on. Okay, yeah, you can definitely add in more customers just like we were looking at a second ago by clicking this blue Create New and filling in the information here. And then once you do that, it should pop up with the with a dropdown with My Tenant and whatever you add. Also, it takes just a second, especially on the first load. So if it doesn't immediately pop up with the box, give it 5-10 seconds. If it still doesn't, log back out and log back in. But the second part of that is exceedingly rare. Usually it just takes a couple seconds for it to pop up. Contacts are used for reorder. So if you want to set it up so that your customers are able to easily one click and just reorder whatever asset from you. For instance, if you do manufacturing of a specific kind of sling, you can set it up so that your customers just click on the reorder button of whichever one that they scan in, and it'll send a request to whichever contact you choose. And it'll say, hey, I want however many 6 of this particular sling, or I want 4 of this type of iron, or something like that. So in order to do that, you'll use the top right hand corner again, this blue box, I do not want to set up contacts for myself because I'm not going to be reordering from myself. But if you have different branches and they all need to order from a head office or something, you could do that from here. For our situation, we're going to have our customers reordering. So I'm going to click on this drop down and choose, for instance, customer one here. Now, I want to have our customer one, whenever they reorder, I want it to go through our sales department. So I can click on create new. I'm going to put in the first name and the last name, and then an email, and save it. And that one's done. That's all I need to do. I can go ahead and head back. However, maybe for Tesla Link, the customer Tesla Link in this case, I don't want them to go to our sales department. They've been one of our customers for a really long time. I want to give them a little bit of extra special treatment. I want them to be assigned to a specific person. So I'm going to switch over to Tesla Link here and then click on create new and add in whatever the person's name is and their email address and click save. Now, whenever the customer goes in, they will get a list of people that they can choose from based on these contacts. So if this customer logs in, they'll see exactly one choice, and that one choice will be special person, and it'll send an email to test@gmail.com. However, if customer one logs in, they'll see one person, and that one person will be the sales department, which in this case goes to the same email, but you can set it up to go to different people or to give them a choice. You can put it in as many as you want, so you might have 5 different options on here for the customer to choose from. That's up to you. Categories are something that's actually getting phased out. This is something that's used with tags just to kind of form a collection of tags. I would recommend staying away from this unless you are migrating over, in which case we'll be working with you specifically to figure out the category and tag structure for you. This is something, like I said, that's getting phased out, so we don't really want to confuse people with it disappearing. Attributes are exactly what we looked at earlier with the extra information down at the bottom of the page. So the ones that you can add onto there, similar to tags and manufacturers, are ones that you have already created. So if I click on search, it's going to give me a list of all the different ones on my list. There we go. You can see I have 27 attributes that I can choose from right now. So I could add in as many of those as I want, or multiples of them. I could put in 3 different attributes that all say capacity, for instance. But if I wanted to add in other ones, if I want to expand this list to include more options for myself, I can click on include opt-out here, just like I did on tags, just like I did on manufacturers, and I can put in the name. So for instance, if I want, do I have length in here? I do already have length. If I want pressure, I can click on search, and this is going to be looking from the global list, and you can see this has 116 different results. So I can go through and find, I want the pressure type. Now you'll notice there's 2 different pressure type attributes here. If we look over on this right-hand side, you'll see why. One is a text type and the other is a number, which the text one means that if pressure type is kind of like the question, if it's what I'm curious about, then the value would be the answer. And this type here on the right-hand side, the text versus number, is what type of answer I can give. So for text, it means I can type in anything that's on the keyboard. I can put in numbers, I can put in special characters, I can put in letters, whatever the case may be. On the other hand, number only allows me to use numbers as well as the period. So if I wanted to put in 0.75, not a problem. I can use number or text. If I want to put in 3/4, like 3/4, I would have to use text because number does not allow slashes. That would be a special character. You can see there's a couple of other different types, for instance, the drop-down type, which means that you get to put in the different drop-down menu, the options on there. And then when your employees are filling things out and they have this attribute, instead of them typing things in, it'll give them a list of things to choose from. So for instance, if you only have 4 or 5 test gauges that you use, you might have an attribute that says test gauge model or something like that. And then you provide a drop-down that has those 4 or 5 options, as opposed to them having to type it in over and over. Now to add these to my list, exact same as before, we're going to click on opt-in, and it'll add it in right here. When I go back up to the top, if I uninclude this opt-out, I click search, give it just a second to switch back over to my list, you'll notice we have this pressure type with data type text, which is exactly what we just added. Same as before, if I want to get rid of it, I can just click on this opt-out for this or any others. Let me clear this, which shows the entire list again for you. And so these are all the different options that I have if I want to add an attribute to an asset. Now, obviously, we don't want to be creating a whole bunch of assets and having to type in everything over and over again. For instance, if I'm creating, let me pull up the list here again. Here we go. If I'm creating wire rope slings that are all going to be 10-foot wire rope slings from P&W Ironworks, I don't want to have to type in that description every time. I don't want to have to add all those tags every time. I might miss one, I might misspell something, and that makes it harder to search for it. So I want to use a template that's going to fill out as much of that information as I can, and then I can fill out the extra. Over on this left-hand side, we have what are called asset templates, which do exactly that. Let me go ahead and search here to pull up one. So you'll see we have 10-foot wire rope sling from P&W Ironworks. If I go ahead and go into the details here, this is what's going to be included. So in this case, I have a manufacturer. I know who the manufacturer is, so I can add that as a field on here that's already filled out. This particular one doesn't have a model number, so I'm not going to put in a model number. If it did, I could put that in and it'll pop up every time. Is master template just means that if you're not using a specific template, it'll default to this. I want to use that just so that we have some template that's being used. The different tags are the tags that are going to be included every time I create an asset from this asset template. So this is basically just going to pre-fill a lot of the information for me. In this case, it'll pre-fill these 4 tags. If I wanted to add more when I create an asset from this asset template, I could add in more at that time, or I could take some out. If, for instance, I didn't want I hoist hook on there, I could create an asset from this asset template and then delete that I hoist hook from that asset. Description is going to be the one that's put in right here. I've put in a couple different attributes. I know every time that this is going to be a 10-foot sling, so I put in the size as 10 feet. And I know that a 10-foot wire rope sling from P&W Ironworks is always going to have a 2-ton capacity, so I put those in. As for the elasticity, that varies a little bit from sling to sling, so I'm not going to put it in right here. I'm going to leave that blank, and that way when I create the asset itself from this asset template, I'll be able to put in the individual value for each one, as opposed to having one that it defaults to. If I know that this particular sling always needs to be inspected at a specific time, I can put in a schedule for that. So I have it set that every 1 year, it'll say, hey, you have a generic inspection due for this particular asset. So this means that every time I create an asset from this asset template, it'll come with this information already filled in. Any questions so far? Alrighty. Forms are going to be the next thing that we look at. So let's go ahead and look at form templates first. Form templates are kind of like the blank sheet of paper that you would print out if you're going to do an inspection by hand. It has all the fields that you'll answer as the questions that you'll answer, whether that's UT values, whether that is the pressure test results, whether that is a visual inspection, whatever the case may be. That part that you would print out if you were doing it on paper is what the form template is. So let's go ahead and press search. I didn't put anything in, so it's going to return all results here. Go ahead and go up to here. So I have 14 different ones on mine. Some people only have 2 or 3. Some people have, I think our biggest customer has something like 500 or 600 form templates. It just depends on what you're using them for, how many different things you need, and how much you can consolidate. Let's go ahead and hop into one of the easier ones here. We have a, let's just do the visual inspection here. So you'll see up in this top part, we have the name. This is the name as it's going to appear to us. And then the report title is how it's going to appear to the customer if we were to give this as a cert to one of our customers. So for instance, we might say this is the LLT-112 form. However, that doesn't help our customer. Our customer needs to know this is a visual inspection. If that were the case, I would put it in right here, LLT-112, and then the report title, I put in visual inspection. And so now when I'm looking at it, this is what it'll show. And when a customer is looking at it, this is what it'll show. The type just makes it a little bit easier to find things. So in this case, it is an inspection because it's a visual inspection. But when you have 500 or 600 different forms, if you don't quite remember the name of what the form template was, it can be useful to be able to sort by type. Tags, again, just another way of searching. That's the keywords for us. And then we have at the bottom here, these 6, and then this part here are the main parts. So these 6 kind of determine what type of form it is. Most of the forms are going to be pass-fail forms. Your other option, if you do not check that, is a completion form. So a completion form, either it is complete or it is in progress, and those are your only choices. If it's a pass-fail form, then your options would be in progress, pass, and fail. So for something like a certification, where the asset will not exist if it doesn't pass the certification, then you might set that to not be a pass-fail. You might say, because this asset exists, this certification exists, and just press OK. Kind of like a certificate of authenticity or something along those lines. However, most of them are going to be pass-fail forms, especially for certifications and inspections. If that's the case, then like I said, it'll give you the option to pass a form, fail a form, or if you don't do either, it'll stay in progress. The top right, saying it'll be used to create test bench forms, are for pressure tests and pull tests. So if you're using our test bench software, you'll need to click on this. If you're using our test bench software and creating a form, I would highly suggest going to our help portal. That help portal has an article on it that explains exactly how to create a form, or alternatively, obviously you can give either myself or support a call, and we'll be happy to go through it with you and show you exactly how to create one. That's a little bit outside the scope of this particular webinar though. Beyond that, we have the different sections here. So sections would be like section headers, or think of it like chapters in a book. You can have as many different ones as you want on there. And then within each section, you have multiple fields, which would sort of be like the paragraphs. So in this particular one, we only have one section that we're doing, which is the visual inspection. But within that visual inspection, we have several fields. We have a section for comments. We have a no-go gauge info, an inspected by, and a test date. And you can see on the right-hand side, just like those data types that we had for the attributes, we have them right here as well. So for the comments, it's just a text. I need to know if there's something going on there. So if there's rust, if there's dents, anything like that, they would be able to type in the text field and say, this is what happened with it. They can also take a picture at that point if they're on mobile, or they can upload a file including pictures if they are on the web or on desktop. The no-go gauge info is a drop-down. So in this case, there are only 2 no-go gauges. So if I click on this drop-down, you'll see we have gauge 1 and gauge 2. So rather than being able to type things in, they'll just choose between those 2 options. The inspected by is text, so they can put in their name. Alternatively, you could make this drop-down and put their name in there. And then the test date is a date field. That way they don't have to type in or change the numbers or anything like that. They'll just click directly onto the date itself. If I wanted to add in another one, I can click on create new here and it'll add another field, or up at the top right here, I can click create new and it'll add another section. Additionally, if I want to make it a pass fail field, I can click on this little pass fail, and that'll do 2 things. One, it'll change the data type to drop down and include those pass and fail as the options. And the other thing it'll do is allow me to pass and fail it in mass. So for instance, if I'm doing a visual and inspection, and rather than including these fields or just one for comments, I'm including one for rust, one for dents, one for other damage, one for thread wear, kind of all the way down, and all of them are just does it pass or fail. I can make all of those pass fail fields, and then when the person goes to fill out the form, there's a button that says pass or fail all, and it'll make it a little bit quicker and easier for them. The other thing that I can do is click on this is required, And if I do that, that means that once they start the form, they have to fill out or answer whatever field that is before they're allowed to pass, fail, or complete it. So in this case, you could make them all required, or if we have to have the inspected by and the date, but for instance, the comments, if they don't have anything, I don't want them to write anything, I can leave that not required. Up at the top, let's go ahead and save it here. So now you can see this appears to me as LLT-112. Now, once a form has been filled out, there's a couple different ways to view it. The first would be under completed work. So if I go to asset management here and go to assets, and then find an asset that we already have a form filled out on. I'm gonna have to take a guess here real quick because I don't remember exactly which ones have forms. There we go. Perfect. So for this particular form, if I go to the completed work, I can say, all right, here's this asset. It had this work done at this time. Let me see what was in that form. And I can click on form detail here. That's going to bring up the previous form. So you can see I can't change anything because this has already been done. If I wanted to be able to edit completed work, then you could send an email to support@testlink.com and specifically request that. We need written confirmation from the tenant administrator saying, yes, we want this ability. Because obviously if you go back changing completed work, TestLink is no longer a system of record for you because you're able to change the data there. So you're still able to, you just have to let us know in written form that that is what you want to do. For this particular account, I don't have that set up. So you can see I'm not able to change anything here. But what I am allowed to do, and this is what the customer would see as well, is download any attachments there. So for instance, this passed, but there was minor wear and tear. So I could download whatever picture this was. In this case, it's not actually a picture of it, but I could download that picture and see what the wear and tear looked like. I can scroll down here and expand this section and see the UT values for it, as well as the previous visual inspection. Now, if I want more than one asset at a time, for instance, if I want an entire job number or order number, I can go over to, oops, sorry, wrong one, to form summary here. And form summary is going to be sort of like asset management is to assets. Form summary is to forms that have been started. So I can search for whatever number of them I want to do. If I have a particular asset number, I can put it in here. But usually this is more for searching by order number or customer PO number. So let's do this particular order number. And when I click search, it's going to bring up the list of every form that has been started on that order number. I can go into any individual one right here, and it'll show exactly like we just saw a second ago. But we have the date it was completed, who completed it, who the customer was, and the location there, and then the type of form right here. So these were all visual inspections, except this last one, which was a test inspection 1. But if you're looking at an order number, for instance, for a frac iron research shop, you would have, for this order, you would have a visual inspection, assembly, disassembly, mag particle, pressure test, final form, paint band, all that good stuff, times each asset. And so it would list out all, however many that is, whether that's 100 forms, 300 forms, 10 forms, depending on how big the order was. The other thing that I can do from here is I can select all these. And when I do that, I get a couple of other buttons up here at the top. So if I get rid of that real quick, you'll see we just have show hide columns, a way to export, and then hiding and expanding the search results. But when I select at least one of these, or in this case, let's do all of them, up in the top, I get 2 options. First is reports. So I can generate a completed ops form details report from here, which will be an in-depth view of each of these forms. It'll list out in a slightly different format than we saw what has happened on each of these. So it'll list every field for every one that we have checked. The other thing I can do is mass action, and I can export this as a PDF all into one document, or I can update the customer PO number or order number. So for instance, if it was originally test 123 and I later realize, just a second. Sorry about that. If I later realize that this shouldn't be test 123, that was a typo, it was supposed to be test with an S on the end, 123, I could update that number right here and just use that update customer PO and order number. Form types, schedules, and workflow templates are a little bit more specialized. We're not going to worry about those in this particular one. Form types is another way of sorting form templates. Schedules is a way of mass updating a bunch of the schedules or the frequency in which you're going to fill out those forms. And workflow templates is a way of setting up multiple form templates in a row with a specific logic behind it. Like I said, those are a little bit more specialized. If any of those sound like something that you do need, feel free to let your account manager know and we can get you some extra training on that particular part. Two more things to go over in this. First is going to be reports. So reports are a way of taking forms and putting them into a more usable layout for you. So if I look in just for instance on here, you can see it shows it in kind of a little bit of a weird format. This is the format if I were filling out this form on web, how it would appear. But I'd rather all this kind of be on one page for me with the information and something that I could hand to a customer. This doesn't really meet that need. So up in the top under reports, if I click on forms, because I want to report against that particular form, it gives me a bunch of different options here. So the first one is what kind of report do I want to run? Out of the box, you get 3 different reports. We definitely can do customized reports based on any criteria that you have. If you want it to look a specific way or if you want it to include specific information, let your account manager know and we'd be happy to work with you on that. The 3 that you get out of the box are completed ops form details, iron certification, and summarized. Iron certification is really only going to apply if you are in frac iron research. That was developed specifically for them because there was a specific list of requirements that everybody in the industry was going to need, and they all had a unified way of viewing that. So we worked with them on how to set that up. There's a specific way to set that up as well. I'm in the middle of writing an article with screenshots on how to do that. So if you have questions, feel free to send me an email, paul.lambert@testlink.com, or wait a little bit and that should be out later this week. Completed ops form details, exactly like I said before, is a listing of everything that happens. It's going to show you all the different fields, everything that passed, everything that failed, everything that was left blank, all that good stuff. It's taking the form, the exact form that you fill out, and putting it into a more usable layout for you. Summarized, on the other hand, is going to give you a more general overview. So if you were to do an entire order, like we'll do in just a minute here for the order test 123, the completed ops form detail would list every field from every form on every asset, whereas the summarized would say, out of all of the forms that you filled out, you had 13 that passed, 4 that failed, and here's the general parts that passed and failed on each one. So it'll say, here are the 13 forms that passed, here are the 4, I believe I said, that failed, and it'll list out what failed on them. So let's go ahead and take a look at both of those just for a quick little comparison. If I click on completed ops form details, the template is going to be what header and footer I want to use. So by default, it just says test link on top and bottom. We're going to go ahead and use that one here. And then I can say what I want to run this report on. So for this particular one, I want to do it on this order number. However, I could do it just on a single asset. I could do it on every asset that's owned by a particular company here if I wanted to do that, or at a particular location, or during last month or this month or whatever date I want to do. There's a lot of different ways for you to be able to kind of narrow down what you're running a report on. But in this case, I just want to run a completed ops form detail on everything within this order. Let me go ahead and click generate here. And it's going to bring me to the process queue. This is where your reports are being generated. So if you have a lot of information in there, it'll take a while to build it. If it's a small one like this, it's already done. You can see right now it says running. Unfortunately, you do need to press the refresh button up here in order to refresh the page and see if it's still running or not. This was a small one, so it was completed. If I were running a completed ops form detail or any report, say on an order that had 150 assets, and each of those 150 assets had 10 forms, obviously it's going to take a lot longer to put that report together. You can do other stuff in the meantime. So if this were a long one, I could start this. It would say running, and then I can go over to asset management, start messing around here, and then I can check back later by going on this left-hand side to process queue. That's going to bring me back. So this one's completed. Let's go ahead and take a peek at it real quick. If I press download, it'll bring it up here. As a quick aside, your customers in here are able to do this as well. So they don't need to come to you and say, hey, can you generate this report? I don't have it, blah, 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 anything like that. They can run it. It's just they'll only be able to view their own assets. They can't do a report on one of your other customers. They can only do a report on their own assets there. So you can see this particular one is 6 pages long, which makes sense because we had 6 forms in here. We have the visual inspection. So this is the actual form that was filled out. You can see the comments were mass action. Each of these fields were filled in. There were no attachments or notes here. And then it gives the general information at the top here. So we have the asset number, the company that owns it, and the description, any extra information here, as well as the general result. So this entire form passed. And then you can see each of these went through fine. If I scroll down, this is going to be the next one. So you'll see this is actually a different asset number and a different form. It did have the same information down here at the bottom because it was this entire thing was done in one mass action, which means I filled out all the forms at the same time and copied it from one to the other because all of them used the same no-go gauge. They were all inspected by me and they were all done at the same time. But as we scroll down, it just gives that same information for each one. You can see this particular one at the end was a visual inspection. It gives the general pass or fail of the form. This one passed, and then it tells you on each one. So each of these, remember, we checked that little box that said is pass fail and is required. So each of these had to be filled out in order to pass this form or fail it. And then you can see here that each one passed. Now, this is the one that we looked at where I said I could download it and it wasn't actually a picture of the wear and tear. This is exactly that form. So we can see this one passed, we put in a comment here, and then we put in a picture right here. And the customer would be able to see that as well then. Now let's compare that briefly to the summarized report. If I go back into reports and forms and switch this to summarized, I still need a template, so I'm going to use the test link one again. And then I can put in my order number here and then click generate. You'll see this is running, so I could go do something else, or since this is going to be a short one, I can click refresh. It's already completed. Go ahead and download here and bring this up. So this is a summarized report. Off the bat, it looks a little bit different. It gives you the information on what it's summarizing. So in this case, I'm running this particular report at every location with this order number from a month ago or a couple weeks ago to today. If I scroll down, it tells us 100% of things passed, and over on this right-hand side, more specifically, 6 passed. It would say, here's how many are in progress, here's how many failed, if that were the case. Scrolling down, this is what I was talking about. It doesn't give you a field view on this, so you don't know that each individual thing passed or any comments that were on there. All you see is that the entire form passed. This is really useful for getting a general idea of what happened with an order. So you might run a summary report on the entire order that shows here's the information, everything passed, failed, whatever the case may be. And then if anything fails, you get a discrepancy report. The discrepancy report is going to list the field that failed, which form it failed on, and then any extra information about it. So if, for instance, one of these were to fail, for instance, this visual inspection here, if this one were to fail instead of pass, and it failed because there was rust on one of them and I took a picture of that, then when I scrolled down to discrepancy report, it would say here's the asset number, here's the form that failed, what the actual description of the thing was, where it is, what failed, so in this case rust, and then any comments and pictures that are included on there. So this is kind of an overall report plus a what failed, as opposed to this one, which gives you a very granular look at exactly what's going on within each form that was filled out. The last thing that we have to look at before we switch over to questions is over in the settings menu here. So if we want to uh, create our own. Remember, we looked at the themes there with the header and the footer. If I go to themes, I can add in my own here. So I can click on create new, add in my header logo and my footer logo, and then I can set it to be the default. And that way, every time I run a report, it'll automatically show up there. I can also do this for my customers. So up in the top right, we have this blue box, just like we saw earlier in this session. If I click on this, I can go to whoever. So for instance, if I want customer one to have a particular header and footer that every time they run a report, it shows up, I can add that in here. Now keep in mind, if I run the report, it will not show up this way. But if the customer runs the report, it will. If I wanted to show up for mine, I have to go back to my tenant and add in that same one under my tenant. It works the same way with users. So if I click search, we see these are the different users that are on this account. These would be the employees of this company. If I want to add a user so that somebody from my customer one is able to see, is able to log on here and see their own assets, let's double check search. Okay, I would change this to customer one up in the top right here, click create new, and then put in first name, last name, and email address. So customer one demo, and then click save. This is not going to give them permission to change anything. It's going to give them permission to view everything, however. If I don't want them to be able to see certain things, for instance, I only want them to be able to see the web version, or only want them to be able to see the mobile version, or whatever the case may be, I have these three checkboxes to control that. But usually you want them to be able to see all of the data that they own, or all of their data that you have. And so you just leave all three of those there, click save, and then let's go back. And you can see now customer one has one person that's able to log in, and this is the email that they use to log in. When you do this, it'll automatically send an email to that email address saying, here's your link to reset your password. You don't have to worry about that. TestLink automatically does it for you. They can reset their password at that point and log in. You can create as many users as you want for each customer. So you're not limited to just the one. If you have if their accounting department and their ops department and their safety coordinator and their everybody needs in, you can do this just over and over. Keep creating a new one, add in that customer. Just be careful not to reuse emails. If you do reuse emails, it can create quite a few problems. So if that happens, send us an email, let us know, and we'll hop on the call with you and get it sorted out. Last thing on here is adding licensing for your own users. So if I want an employee to be able to do something, I've already added them here in this case. And I can go into the details of that user. So for instance, let's go into this first one here. And over on this left-hand side, you can see these are the different licenses that we have. So I have 22 remaining of the location status management, which is kind of the base license. And then over here, you can see the different permissions that they have. So right now, this user is not able to browse, create, delete, or update locations, but they can browse assets. They can browse and create reorders, so on and so forth. So going through each of these, if I want them to have it, I click activate. Right now, obviously they're activated here, but I can click deactivate if I want to remove it. And then we have all the different options. So you can get very, very specific in terms of what you want to look at. Jay, when I mentioned earlier that you might not be able to have, you might not have access to your customers, this is what I was talking about. These couple boxes right here. With those, you can choose who has the ability to see it and who does not. So for instance, before I had done this, this particular user who doesn't actually exist would not be able to view it. So you can go through and just activate whatever you need to activate for. For instance, if I wanted them to have head office, click activate. It would say, are you sure? Yep. And then I could check these boxes, or if I don't want them to have it, just click deactivate. They no longer have it and the license comes back. Now this is a lot of boxes to check and go through individually. If I want to be able to kind of assign them a general role, I can do just that. Up at the top, there's this little shield button. If I click apply role, after I've activated all the licenses I want to give them, I can choose what I want them to be. So limited user is going to be somebody who really can just kind of view things. They can't do much else. A standard user is somebody who's able to do all the basics of somebody that would be out in the field. And tenant administrator is going to be yourself. This is going to be the person who has full view of everything and full access to everything. So let's make this person a standard user. Click load, and you'll see it adds in a couple different boxes here. It's going to check a couple on here. But these are just the basic things. They don't need to be able to create locations, for instance, as a standard user. If I do want them to be able to, I can either add that permission individually down there or click on tenant admin and load, and you'll see almost everything checks. The only thing that doesn't check are these imports, and that's to import data, which is, again, outside the scope of this particular webinar. That covers pretty much everything for tenant admin on here. I have probably 2 or 3 minutes for questions. Jay, I think you're the only one on here at this point because the other person left. Let me double check here. Into the TestLink application. Yes, you can. So that is something that we didn't go over for this particular one. Let me log out and show you a different account that has that permission because I do not have that permission right now on there. So over on this left-hand side, assuming you have the permission for it, there's a button that says data import. And if I click on that, I can choose what I want to import. So for instance, you said clients, assets, and other information. So we have one for customers and we have another for assets. You would just choose whichever one you're doing. For instance, let's do customer here. Click on this download template, and it's going to download the thing that you're going to need to fill in. You have to put it in the exact way that we have it in the Excel file here. So let me bring that up here real quick. Any box that has red in it is required. So you would put in the name of the company, their email, the address, and so forth. And then once you finish that, you would upload that file by clicking select files here, choosing the file itself, and then it'll let you know if everything's good. It'll let you know if there's an error as well. For instance, if you forgot a required box or you put in invalid information, for instance, you only put in asterisks or something where you're not allowed to put special characters, it'll let you know on what line things are messed up and what was messed up on there. And if everything's good, it'll let you click import. One thing to keep in mind is you have to have all the information before you add this. So for instance, on the assets you're asking about importing, the tags that you put in already have to exist in here. You would have to create the tags in here and then add them to your Excel sheet. So it's not going to create things and add them, it will just add them. So we would need to create the tags first and then add it. Same thing, you can't import an asset for a customer that doesn't already exist in your test link. So you'll need to import customers and then your assets. So just make sure that everything is already in the system as an option to choose from in TestLink before you try and do an import on it. If you need any additional help with that, let your account manager know, and we'll be happy to walk you through exactly how to do that and work with you to make sure that the template's filled out right and everything. That is about all the time that we have for today. If you do have other questions, feel free to contact either myself, paul.lambert@testlink.com, or call your account manager, and we can set up a time to go through things with you. I appreciate you coming out here, and we have another one on Thursday at the same time.